We write poems on typewriters for strangers for money on topics that the strangers choose.
I'm Timothy Bradford, and I'm one half of Short Order Poems. We started Short Order Poems in 2014 at Elemental Coffee with Chad Reynolds here, and we were trying to think of ways to make poetry accessible to the general public in a way that was a little more appealing than your standard poetry reading or even an open mic sort of thing.
I was sitting at Elemental Coffee one day, meeting with a client. We were talking through their company stuff, and as we were talking, Chad Reynolds, who was sitting next to me at the next table over, was having this conversation with a guy that I didn't know. And I overheard a little bit of their conversation and didn't really know what all was going on because I was paying attention to my meeting, but it kept catching my attention. So as soon as I was done with my meeting, I just totally butted in. And I leaned over and I was like, Chad, can I butt into your meeting? Like, can I interrupt? Like, can I be part of this conversation? He was like, come on. So we sat down and we started talking about it, and they were just sitting down talking about what are some ideas for how we can kind of promote poetry in Oklahoma City and kind of raise awareness about all that. And they kind of were bouncing some ideas around, and I just was super honest with them because I have opinions. I'm full of opinions and thoughts.
And then Chad is like, oh, I have this friend in Chicago who does this thing called Poems While You Wait. And they sit on the streets with manual typewriters and they type. And Brian Bergman was sitting with us, and he's involved with consultation, ideas, branding, all of these different things. And he's a really good ideas person, I think. And he just lit up. He's like, that is brilliant. That's a brilliant idea.
As soon as I said it, I was like, that's more than sort of cool. That's like amazing. So I was like, so how do we do that? Like, what does this look like? And they said, well, what if we set up at a table and we did everything on typewriters, we did everything like real like analog, and we actually take orders for poems. And I said, well, is that gonna be weird? Like, what does that look like? And again, they just started unpacking it and talking more and more about it. And as they're talking, they're getting more excited. I'm getting more excited because I'm like, this is gold. Like, this is gold. Like I'm getting shivers all over again because it was like, this is really it. Like, you're looking people in the face, you're being accessible, you're being human beings, you're interacting with people. Like, this is everything that you want to be, because at the end of the day, you don't want to be a poet, you want to be a human.
And he was in the middle of putting together H&8th. So this was before the first H&8th. And he said, if you can put that together, that exact idea, in 3 weeks, we're going to have the first H&8th, which we didn't really know what that was going to be, a vague idea. But I'll give you a spot right here in front of Elemental on the corner of H&8th. And we're like, all right, let's do it. So,
and they were like, you think this would be a cool thing for there? I was like, cool is an understatement. Like, this would be an amazing thing. So we went, okay, let's figure out how to do this.
We went out and got some manual typewriters. I actually had an old one. Practiced up a little bit, and that was the birth of Short Order Poems. And we wrote that first night. We had pretty good turnout at first, some friends and family stopping by, but what's amazing is once you get typing, that's what really draws people in. They hear the sound of that typewriter and they see you working, and they're like, what are you doing? And as soon as you explain, some people immediately want in. They're like, oh, that's awesome.
In my head, I'm thinking like, hey, if 10 people do it tonight, this will be cool. 10 people, like real low expectations. And I'm trying to like temper their expectations so that they don't get frustrated or disappointed or anything else, because it's like, hey, if we think something's gonna be this runaway hit, and then it's not as big as we want it to be, then we don't put all our energy to it. So I was like, hey, let's just be excited about anything. So, and then the event starts, and there's throngs of people in the streets, and every time I look over, there's a line at their table. Every time I look over, every time I walk by, they're just head down, typing away. Both of them are sitting there with their typewriters just going 90 miles an hour, and I was like, hey, I think this might be working.
So we wrote pretty much nonstop for 4 hours. I mean, I think we each got up maybe once for a 5-minute short break, but it was clear immediately that it worked and that people were very intrigued by it and that we enjoyed it too. There's a long history of this kind of writing poems in a very spontaneous sort of style for a patron, whether they just be somebody who walked up and said, I want a poem about my grandchild or my dog or my girlfriend or boyfriend, all the way back to historical examples of people wanting epics. And
Yeah, a good example is Virgil was commissioned by the Emperor Augustus to write the Roman version of the epic poem. So the Aeneid is the Roman version of the Iliad or the Odyssey. And I love that example because Virgil, he writes a poem that satisfies Augustus, but he subtly maybe undermines the commission a little bit. And I think we've had to find ways to impart ourselves into these poem topics that we don't choose. And that's part of the fun of it. You meet in the middle somewhere between the patron and the poet, and what you come across is what you create is always a surprise. Or I should say the best poems that we write are always surprising. We don't really know where we're going when we start a poem. Yeah, sure, you've got the topic. You start writing along a line of thought, or you start with an idea or an image, and it gets you into the poem. Almost every time we write, speaking for myself, I get lost in the poem. And there's always a moment where I'm not sure where I'm going to go or how I'm going to get out of this poem that I've gotten myself stuck into. And in the best examples, you get yourself out in a way that's surprising and meaningful that you could never have seen coming. And you do it all in 20 minutes. And then you wrap it up in a little bow and you hand it to the patron, and they typically respond very well. A good example of how we've broken down the barriers between poets and readers is exemplified in the case of these two young people, a couple. They had a baby. They started to come to us in the fall of 2014 while she was pregnant, and we wrote poems for her unborn child. Beatrice, I think was her name. And then the little girl was born, and then we continued to write poems for her. They would show up at every one of our events. And they framed each one, and they put them on the walls of her nursery. Now, I just love that story so much. And that little girl is going to grow up, and she has a poem written for her since before she was born.
So the Make It Rain poems it came about from a grant that we received from Springboard for the Arts. And Springboard for the Arts is an organization that works to put local artists in touch with businesses and organizations for them to work together and create projects for the community. And so this one was an idea that we actually got from Boston, and I think Portland had done it as well, to where they installed different poems or art pieces on the ground using waterproof paint. And so then when it rains, what's been painted on the ground shows up as clear.
We wanted our involvement to feel like a short order poems event. So we recruited people that we had worked with, then we sent out a call for topics on our social media. We received topics via Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, and email. And then I'll let you take it from here. What do we do from there once we had the topics?
Once we had the topics, we were thinking about curating them and saying, okay, these are good, these are bad, but then we're like, no, for some poets, soggy socks might be a great topic, and for others, not. So we met at the Starbucks up in Nichols Hills and have some footage on our social media of Chad famously drawing topics out of a hat. We had like 65 and cut them all up, and we drew 3 for each poet, and then we emailed those topics off to them. And in the meantime, it was a really interesting process because there was a bit of a timeline thing going on. We started meeting in January, and we knew we wanted to try to have these poems down on the sidewalk in time for the spring rain. So, there's not a whole lot of time for a project this big. We sent them off the topics. We said, you have 10 days, which first short order poems, we give people 15, 20 minutes, but this was something that was going to be a little more monumental, something that's going to be around, more people are going to see it, a little more pressure. Plus, we said it really needs to be 3 to 5 lines long because we're going to cut it into a stencil and then use this hydrophobic solution to put it on the sidewalk. So now you have to condense your work, your thoughts, everything, or you can write a longer poem and we'll excerpt pieces from it. So those were the parameters for the poets. We sent off the topics. This was, I think, mid to late February at this point, by the time we'd gotten to that point.
And then once we received them back, we started with all the permitting process and getting everything lined out. And so I think that's probably the most unique thing, is that not only are we featuring local artists, but also national poets as well.
What's funny is I came across an email recently where the initial conversation was, let's try and place 8 to 10 poems. We ended up with 24 different poems that we picked, because some of the poets, we had 16 poets writing, including ourselves. Some of them wrote more than one poem. And so we got excited about that. We're like, all right, so these are really good. Let's place more. And Stacy and Riley were into it. And so we sat down, we had a Google map, and we started thinking, oh, this one has boats in it. Let's put it near the canal. This one has coffee. Let's put it near Clarity. This one's about Woody Guthrie. Some weren't as clear a placement, sort of thing.
So something we were super excited about for this project is when it rains, downtown here in the core, a lot of people tend to use the underground, which we love the underground and activating that space, but having these rain poems outside has definitely gotten a different crowd to stay out during the rain and grab their umbrellas and go search for the poems around town.
There's an impermanence about this here. There's an epic quality, a monumental quality to these poems, and yet they're still impermanent. They disappear. I love that about this, because what we've done isn't going to last forever, but what we've done is going to create memories and is going to stick around in the minds of the people who see these poems forever. And that's been a trope in poetry forever.
I think they've been a huge hit. So they've been blowing up over social media. We've been using the hashtag Make It Rain Poems, which is cheeky and fun.
Clarity Coffee has these really big windows in front, so we get an opportunity to see people as they pass by when it's raining, to just be shocked by this poem that suddenly appeared. We've gotten really great reactions. People are super into it.
People walk by and they see something other, something they didn't expect, something they didn't anticipate, and they are stopped by it. And in being stopped by it, it changes their day. What's not to love about that?
People are really excited when it rains, and they're like, oh, go look for the rain poems. But I think really one of the funnest things you can do is take out a squirt bottle and take the map, and if you have some free time, I got some kids, it's really fun watching the poems appear as you squirt them down on the sidewalk. I think it's, for me, as magical as seeing them appear in the rain.
And maybe that's kind of a little reminder for us as adults. It's like, pause in the rain and read this thing and allow yourself to be moved by it.
So all of our poems can be found on downtownkc.com, and on our website we have a page for the Make It Rain poems, and there's an interactive Google map embedded in the website. So visitors can come and they can look on our website and find all the locations and the bios of the poets who wrote them. And then so even when it's not raining, you can still go out and take a water bottle or a squirt gun and enjoy the poems for yourself.
I'm Chad Reynolds. I'm the other half of Short Order Poems. Tim said it all. Sorry, Chad Reynolds, one half of Short Order Poems, the other half, the younger half. These are all in-jokes. If you're a human, then a poem can help you be more human, understand your humanity. So give it a chance, and thank you. That'll be $10.